Well, the original, when they, like Microsoft came to me with the idea, Tommy was already on board. It was the only description of the project was it was an interactive, crowdsourced comic, which I thought was an interesting idea. And I've been a big comics fan, but I'd never actually written a comic before. And through doing TV and film, they've always tried to kind of have a good interaction with fans. And sometimes there was one time when we were doing Space where people would write on our website lots of ideas for the show, and you had to not read them, just in case anything that you wrote was going to be similar to that. So you had to say, don't look at any idea for whatever you do. And the one nice thing about this is something where I write the setup and people help me further it on. So I wrote the first episode, and the crazy thing about watching this for us is in terms of it just being 6 months of work, because I didn't have the idea for this character until January, mid-January even. And so to be here and watch those episodes and credits to this one, I think they get better and better each one, and it's amazing. But so basically I wrote the kind of setup, and it was kind of based around the fact that last year I usually write with other people, and last year I'd written something on my own. And eventually I kind of got through it, but it was a real sort of uphill struggle just to kind of get motivated during the day and stop procrastinating. And my Nespresso machine is one of the main things that will be break up the day very nicely, just finding an excuse to go and make another coffee and not get any writing done. So there's a lot of that, and there's lots of stuff in the first one that I would, when I wasn't writing with somebody else, I would look for other things to bounce off. Not just looking at things randomly on Google, doing the kind of searching things in the paper for odd names and stuff. I even do this thing where I drive around and listen to the radio on scan, where you hear this different 20 seconds of lots of stations. So I did all those weird things. I didn't go as far as the Scrabble or the cutting up the papers. So that was the idea of the setup of what if this guy has got writer's block, but then he has a blackout, he finds all this stuff, but then it's over to you guys to write the next bit. So after the first episode, I think after 48 hours, I sort of gave Tommy the sort of license to kind of pick his favourite sketches. And I listened to all the voicemails and the prose, and part of that was just an enormous amount of stuff to get through. Yeah. And actually, one of the things that inspired something in the second episode is I'm pretty old school. I printed out all of the prose. So I had about 45 pages.
On paper?
On paper. Remember paper?
Describe paper for me.
Do you remember paper and Sharpie back in the old days? So I had this big wad of thing, and what was funny is that it was actually, yes, it was 109 pages. So that actually was something, as well as the prose, I'm thinking, if I hadn't printed it out, I wouldn't have had the idea that he took it out. Maybe I even took it to a cafe and sat there with a Sharpie and ticked and crossed things. So I sort of had an idea of where I would like it to go, but I did, the stuff in the second episode, we've already mentioned Coffee Monsters in the first one, but Cafindo, both the name and the drawing, is I think from two separate contributors.
Yeah, right? We're two separate, yeah.
Some guy came up with the name, and another guy came up with the design, we married them together. But there's lots of stuff, all of the voicemail stuff is from the public. So I would sort of have an idea of where I'd like to take it, but then I would bounce off what people had written. And I think the most amazing thing that I found that was really encouraging was pretty much everybody after the first episode tried to write in the voice of the character, or even in Julian's voice,
And Tommy, from your point of view, we've heard an awful lot about being a collaborative process. Obviously, you're physically in the same space. How did it work from your point of view as far as doing the animations were concerned? What did you get sent? How did you then draw?
It was always, we're always up against it, because we're trying to get the stuff from the audience, and then Edgar would frankly be trying to figure out what would work, and then he'd be feeding the stuff to me, and then there's a certain amount of stuff that you could sort of think ahead on, like any designs, or I knew I wanted Brendan's hat to blow off at one point, so then when we saw the monster with the hat, it was oh man, well that's perfect, and then so then you get inspired by that and piece your idea with someone else's together and come up with something completely new. So then I would get the script from Edgar and then start storyboarding it. And then as I'm storyboarding it, I'm then feeding that back to Edgar, and he was either in London or in LA. I'm in North Carolina. And then I have a team of guys, a guy named Scott Benson who is in Pittsburgh, who does a lot of the After Effects stuff, where I give him all my art and we work together to actually bring it to life. And then I've got two guys in LA that help kind of build the models models for my designs of like the car or Brandon's flat or the city. And but we're all spread around the world, really. You know?
Tonight, weirdly, is the first time that me, Tommy, Julian Barrett, and David haven't been in the same room. So we actually Tommy hadn't met Julian or David until today. So you know.
And does that work in terms of as a collaborative process? Does it work with being able to send stuff around across the internet rather than being in a room? Because obviously, Jonathan Ross, you talked about actually being in a room and having lunch together as being important. But is it just as collaborative, being able to do it in all these different areas?
I think over the four it got kind of easier, and in fact the last one has come together, which I think is the one that and I say this because this man did all the hard work on that. The animation is, I think the animation was the best, and that was the shortest time frame that we had. So we got to kind of like a process where it was starting to kind of get easier the way of working. But it's very it's a really interesting experiment for me because I'd never done anything where last time I saw David before tonight was before we started, where I said, would he like to do it? We had coffee about it, and then we did everything else by email.
Yeah.
And I was in the room with Julian doing the voiceovers, but I hadn't seen Tommy since, January?
January, February, something like that, yeah.
So I'm kind of one of the nicest things about doing this, and not just interacting with the public, is actually bringing something together like this that hopefully feels cohesive, where none of us are in the same room.
Yeah, we couldn't have done this, I don't think, years ago. I mean, not even that long ago. A handful of, not only just the whole concept in general of, co-authorship with the public, but all of us, constantly being in touch with each other, just via the internet. It's great.
It's important to remember also, high tech as it may be, the designs all begin with pen and paper and drawing. I mean, it's a mixture of the traditional and the new, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even with Edgar printing out the prose and having, even when I would send the storyboards, I actually draw the storyboards visually on a Wacom Cintiq tablet because it's really fast. I can do changes, I can move stuff around, immediately email it off to Edgar. And then, but when he sends me feedback, I print those out because I like to have them there with me.
Yeah.
I like to have them in the house with me, making little sketches on them, so yeah, there's something. And then some of the stuff in there I've drawn on that tablet, but as much as possible, there's something about, there's a sequence where he's running away from this caffeine dough, and it's all just kind of charcoal, and and it just had a great feeling to it, So as much as we could put into that, we did, but it was hard to make it all feel cohesive, That was a challenge for all of us, I think, but I think we pulled it off.
The other thing is, we changed the sort of form of the contribution sometimes. When it came to the third episode, all of that prose that he reads out is all people's submissions. But then, the artwork thing, there wasn't sort of as an easy sort of fit in terms of sketches on a pad. So in that case, people had put artwork on the site, and then with some of the ideas he had, I suggested to someone, I said, pick your favorite artist from the site, and we'll get them to draw some stuff. So then it's actually artists who contributed saying, hey, do you want to do a couple of frames for us?
Yeah.
So it's nice that it kept sort of changing in that way, the way of bringing in. And the last episode, I mainly kind of read everything and then wrote the episode, and then retroactively went back and credited all the people that had put the ideas in my brain. In that case as well, what's nice is that people there becomes a consensus of what they want to happen. And so some of the same ideas come together. So and I knew which way I'd like it to go, and so sometimes you can say, that person has suggested exactly what I was thinking of, or a lot of people want to see caffeine dough be the thing that breaks out.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have suggested him erupting, and a lot of people have suggested Control-Alt-Delete. But it's really nice just to kind of over the 3 episodes, to treat the material from the public in a different way each time.
Explain to us about the mystery girl that you never found as well. I mean, this is true, right? So
the voice of the American girl in the second one, we never found out who that was. And she'd left no number, some people, most people left either a Twitter handle or a Skype handle or a name, and some people just anonymous, and she was one of the people. And then it's tricky because then when you ask, as I did on the internet, for that person to come forward, then you get a bunch of people who aren't that girl coming forward. So eventually, right up until the wire, we were trying to track down that girl, because I wanted her to do the dialogue in the third one, and eventually we got an actress in who was great. But the image for the girl is Ellie Mortimer, who was somebody who sent their photo in, who had actually written as well.
Yeah.
Was actually an aspiring writer, but had sent kind of like photos in, so we used her as the template for Victoria.
This is probably a good moment to spread it. So Julian's there and David's over there. You guys come up on the stage, we can talk about the sound of the piece as well.